Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 313 for the 6th of Tishrei in a leap year. Pretty recently, I went on a small mini vacation to Myrtle Beach. Myrtle Beach is a very touristy vacation town, if any of you have been there. And I happened to be staying in a place that was really close to an amusement park. So now the really fun thing about amusement parks, amongst the rides and all that stuff, is the lights. It's really bright neon lights. It kind of gives this like party atmosphere. And the fun thing about staying in a place that's near the amusement park or that's near some kind of fair or something like that is that even if you're not actually at the amusement park at that time, and even if your windows are closed, and even if the curtains are drawn, very often, if the lights are intense enough, if the party outside is great enough, the light kind of seeps in just a little bit. Hopefully not enough to keep you up at night, but just enough to give you that sense that there is something exciting going on. There's some kind of party outside. And while the curtains might be covering up the light to a certain extent, unless they're really those really thick, like blackout curtains, like entirely, usually there's a little bit of light that comes through. And of course, this is going to depend on the intensity of the light, and it's also going to depend on the opacity of the curtains. So how does this relate to the Tanya today? Well, today we're actually going to be talking about this idea in a spiritual sense, this idea of a spiritual partition, a spiritual curtain that exists, and a light that actually is so powerful that it bursts through the partition. However, just like a physical curtain, even if the light bursts through the curtain, it's not going to have that same intensity as if the curtain weren't there. So the curtain does kind of serve as this barrier to a certain extent. The same thing is spiritually as well, that the partition serves a very big purpose in the spiritual sense, in the sense of really blocking out the full radiance of the light. But as we'll see, the light does still seep through. The light bursts through the partition is the language that's used to such an extent that it's the same light, even if it's not necessarily as radiant as it is behind the partition, it's still there. So what is this talk of radiance and light and partitions and all that stuff? What is this talking about? So again, this is going to be one of those a little bit more esoteric episodes today. We're still in the middle of Epistle 20 of Iggeres HaKodesh, which is the entire epistle is quite esoteric, quite Kabbalistic. But again, I'm going to try to make this as comprehensible and relatable as I can based on this illustration of the partition and all of this. So what we're talking about, what the takeaway message is of today's episode, if you don't get anything else out of today's episode but this one message, it's this, that the light, God's infinite light, God's radiance, is just as much present here in our physical reality, in our everyday life, as it is in the highest of all the spiritual realms. There's an unbroken chain of this light that seeps through all of the worlds, like in this way of almost like a laser beam. Like, so lasers, like again, that might be a good imagery to think about as well. A laser is known to be so intense that sometimes it can actually even like burn through fabric if the laser is intense enough. And that's kind of the idea here of this beam of light that we're going to be discussing today. This beam of light in Hebrew is referred to as the Cove. We've spoken about this already. We brought it up a few times. Cove in Hebrew literally means line. For a full discussion of the Cove, it's like that's outside of the scope of this particular podcast. But in brief, the Cove is known as like the measuring stick through which God measures out all of creation. So it's sort of like when God originally, he wanted to, I've mentioned this in previous episodes, God wanted to create a world, wanted to create a reality outside of himself. So first he had to make space for that. So he totally removed himself, so to speak, in such a way that his light could not be perceived at all by anything that he would create. And then it's like, okay, now there is this space, this void, this empty void. And then in a very measured way, God brought his light back in an extremely concentrated and constricted way. And this is what's known as the Cove. And this is, again, the measuring stick through which God measured out how much of every detail of creation, what every single detail of creation was going to look like. So the Cove really contains within it, it's kind of like the essence, the really concentrated form of all of creation is contained within this Cove. And this Cove travels through a certain path, as we'll see. And we've learned about the different worlds. So we have like the world, the four basic worlds, the world of Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. And we spoke about how really creation in the real sense of having something other than God really only manifests in the second world, in the world of Bria. Whereas in the first world, the world of Atzilus, it's just emanations. Everything is really nullified to God. So in that world of Atzilus, the Cove is totally there and it's totally shining and radiant in its full glory. It totally manifests godliness in the full sense. But then within that Atzilus, in order for there to be that thing other than God in a real sense, that ex nihilo creation that we've been talking about, God set up a partition through which would stop, which would halt that line, that Cove from moving. And then that partition, after that partition, that's when all the other worlds come about. And some people mistakenly think that the partition really obstructed the light entirely, so that now it was just like, okay, up until the partition, it was really just pure godliness, and it was really the essential nature of godliness and this ability to create ex nihilo. And then after that, after the partition, you have all of these different creatures and these different creations, but somehow they're really, really separate from God. And what we'll learn about today is that this is not the case at all. That the only difference in terms of the worlds that are below Atzilus is in terms of the radiance of this Cove, in terms of how much they manifest and reveal their inherent godliness. But in terms of their essential nature, the godliness is still there. The ability to create this creative ability, which is epitomized in the creation of ex nihilo, is still there in all of the worlds as it comes down. So today we're going to explore this a little bit. It does get quite technical, so just bear with me. And again, if you don't get all the details, that's okay. Again, the main message of today is just this idea of how godliness, essential godliness, really seeps down into everything and everywhere into our physical worlds. And that's the basic idea. But today we're going to really, try to unpack it all, like in kind of like mapping it out, like we're exploring that whole process, just like we would if we were studying, let's say, biology, or something like that, where we would want to really explore a certain organ or a certain cell or something like that and really get into all the details. So that's kind of what we're doing here. So let's get into the text and see how the Alter Rebbe explains this. And once again, I will explain this to the best of my ability, but it's so dense. There's just like a lot of really, really dense ideas here that each one, like every sentence could be a whole episode or more on its own. So bear that in mind when you're feeling frustrated. Like I kind of felt frustrated in learning this and thinking about how to give it over, because it is really, really dense, but we'll do the best we can. We'll learn this together. So here we go. So, and again, for context, we are in the middle of Epistle 20 of Iggeres HaKodesh. So the Alter Rebbe begins and he brings up this idea of the zivug, of the union between the Zer Anpin and Nukva of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. So just as a quick refresher, we've spoken about this previously, that there's the Zer Anpin is the 6 male masculine emotive attributes. The Nukva is Malchus. And we've spoken about how the union between the Zer Anpin and the Nukva, world of Atzilus, creates the souls and the angels within the world of Bria. So you can go back a few episodes ago where we spoke about that. So now we're talking about, so what happens? So that's when you have this union between the masculine and feminine in the world of Atzilus. What happens if you have this union, this intimacy between the Zer Anpin and the Nukva in the three lower worlds, in the worlds of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya? This union between these two forces causes the creation, something from nothing, of all of the creatures and all of the formations and all of the things that were made in these particular worlds. So in the Hebrew, the wording is very specific. Why does it say the beings, the things that were the formations and the things that were made is kol hanivraim, hanotzarim, v'hanesim. This is a reference to each one of those worlds. Nivraim is an allusion to the world of Bria, the creation. Notzarim is an allusion to the world of Yitzira, formations. Nesaim is an allusion to the world of Asiya. So basically, once again, the union between the masculine and feminine forces, the Zer Anpin and the Nukva, within each one of these worlds is what creates something from nothing, all of the different creatures in each one of these worlds. How does this happen? How does it create something from nothing? How does this process happen? It happens through the light of the neshama that is found within them. Why? Because the light of the neshama is godliness. And this light of the neshama comes from the vessels of the 10 spheres of Malchus of Atzilus. So let's just pause here for a second and explain all of this and what we're talking about, if you're as confused as I am or as I was when I first read this. So the basic idea, as we've been learning about, if you've been following along this epistle for a while, is we've been really, really talking about and emphasizing the specialness of the uniqueness of ex nihilo, and that ex nihilo creation is something really, really special, and it's really different than causality, that type of creation, like an evolutionary type of creation. And we talked about how this ability, this godly ability, which is unique to God to create something from nothing, the origin of that ability, the source of that ability is in Malchus of Atzilus. That's where it all happens. And to be specific, it's specifically within the vessels of the 10 spheres within Malchus of Atzilus, to be really particular. And we said that is alone the only place that has that power to create something from nothing. Everything else we spoke about, yes, different types of creations happen, but they happen in an evolutionary way. The power of ex nihilo, it has to come from those vessels of the 10 spheres of Malchus of Atzilus. We spoke about this more in depth in previous episodes, so you can look that up there. So now the question is, the basic question that's coming up is, if that's the case, that all of ex nihilo creation must come from this level of the 10 spheres of Malchus of Atzilus, how is it possible that now we're saying that these other worlds, not Atzilus anymore, now we're talking about Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya, that they too have this ability to create something from nothing, that they create, this creation happens through the union and masculine and feminine forces, also creates these beings within their world. How does that happen? So the Alter Rebbe explains this happens because of the light of the neshama that's found within each one of these worlds. And the light of the neshama, the light of the soul that's found in each one of these worlds, like each world has different aspects to it. And one of the aspects of each world is its soul. And that soul is godliness. And that soul comes from the vessels of the 10 spheres of Malchus of Atzilus. So to explain this in kind of like a progressive way, is that the way this happens is that within the world of Atzilus, then you have the vessels within the world of Atzilus. And we said that there's actually 30 vessels in total. There's 10 internal vessels, 10 middle vessels, and 10 external vessels. And these 10 external vessels of each world become the neshama, become the soul of the world below it. So here we see that basically the 10 external vessels of Malchus of Atzilus became the neshama of the world of Bria. And so since the neshama of the world of Bria is coming from these 10 vessels, which those 10 vessels have within them the power to create ex nihilo, the neshama also contains within it that vitalizing force, that ability to create something ex nihilo. So that's reason number one. We're going to go through a few reasons as to why it is that these different worlds, the neshama within each one of these different worlds has the ability to create ex nihilo. So that's one. It's because the neshama actually comes from the vessels, from the kelim of Malchus of Atzilus. So which is the source of the creation ex nihilo. Now, reason number 2, what's the second reason? So within this Malchus of Atzilus, within these vessels of Malchus of Atzilus, which is where the neshama comes from, we find that there is a radiance of the Cove, of the infinite one, the infinite light, the Or Ein Sof. The radiance of this Cove is vested within the world of Atzilus up until what's known as the Parsa. So the Parsa is what's known as the partition. So we spoke about this in the introduction. So within the world of Atzilus, there's the radiance of God. It's totally God emanation and nothing but God. And then there's this partition that separates Atzilus from the other worlds. And up until that point of the Parsa, up until the point of the partition, the radiance of this Cove shines and is very strong and very manifest there. And by virtue of it being very strong and manifesting there, so what does that mean? It means that this radiance of the Cove radiated specifically within the vessels of the 10 spheros of Malchus. So now, again, so back to these 10 spheres of Malchus. So we said already that the 10 spheres of Malchus, they created the neshama of the world below it, right? The world of first Bria and then eventually Yetzirah and Asiya. So since the radiance of the Cove was vested within these vessels, then when the vessels broke through the partition, because that's what they needed to do in order to get to those lower worlds, they smuggled along with it this radiance of the Cove along with it. And so this caused the fact that this radiance of this Cove to shine really within these other worlds, these worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asira, just like it shines within the world of Atzilus itself. So again, so even though, yes, the partition is there, but somehow it broke through the partition by virtue of kind of being smuggled through with the kelim. Just like it's like if you have a partition on a window that is supposed to not have the light come in, if the light is strong enough and if you use a laser beam or something like that, then even the light might be able to burst through that partition. So far we have 2 reasons why that this potential for creation ex nihilo, this creative ability, is found within the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asira. The first one is that, okay, the creative ability to create these things within these worlds is coming from the neshama of each world, the source of which is the kelim, the vessels of Malchus of Atzilus. And that Malchus of Atzilus is, like we've spoken about, kind of the hub of where the creation ex nihilo happens. The second reason, which we just mentioned, is because of the Cove, because the Cove really is the true source of the creation ex nihilo, and that Cove is what gets the radiance of that Cove gets vested within these vessels, and that kind of gets smuggled through together with the vessels into those lower worlds, giving them the ability then to create ex nihilo. Now we come to a third reason. What's the third reason? Okay, so up until now, we've only been talking about the radiance of the Cove. But what about the Cove itself? So within the world of Atzilus, the Cove doesn't live in the world of Atzilus. The world of Atzilus is still a world, after all. So the world of Atzilus, as great and lofty as it is, it's merely the world of emanation. These are where emanations of God happen. But the Cove itself, the actual Cove, the actual line, measuring stick through which God created the world, this is vested in something even higher than Atzilus. Where is it vested? It's vested at the end of what's known as the Netzach Hod Yesod, or otherwise known as Nehi, of Adam Kadman. Again, don't get overwhelmed with all the terminology, but what is Adam Kadman? Adam Kadman literally means primordial man, and this is a world, kind of, quote unquote, I'm going to say quote unquote world, that's even above Atzilus. Why is it a quote unquote world? Because it's not usually listed in when we talk about worlds. We talked about how there's the 4 basic worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, but then there's this thing called Adam Kadman. What's Adam Kadman? Primordial man. This is the place of really potential, of it's sort of before any kind of world. It's the planning stage, really even more than planning. It's it's before, it's the blueprint, kind of, I guess you could say, of the worlds, really that beginning stage of everything before there were actually any kind of worlds at all. And so that place of Adam Kadmon contains within it everything. It contains within it, it's sort of God's plan, God's master plan for all of creation. the higher worlds, the lower worlds, all of those kind of things. And so this Cove is the actual, where is the Cove? Not the radiance of the Cove, but the Cove itself is vested in this place. This is where it's found. It's found in the lower parts of Adam Kadman. And what is this lower parts of the Adam Kadman? This is the lower parts of what's known as the feet of the Yosher. What does that mean? Yosher in Hebrew means like straight. So with it, which ends in Malchus of Asiya. Okay, so let's just unpack that for a second. So within Kabbalah, and specifically here we're talking about the world of Adam Kadmon, this like primordial world, there are two aspects of it. There's the aspect of what's known as Igulim, which means circles, and then there's the aspect of Yosher, which is lines, like a straight line. The difference between those two things is that the Igulim, remember we said that the Adam Kadmon is like sort of like the blueprint that kind of like contains the entire purpose of creation. So the Igulim level of that is that it's the purpose of creation in a more general sense. It's like the generalities, like the big picture of the whole thing, kind of like seeing everything all at once. It's like it's related to that level of Sovev Kol Amin, the light of encompassing all the worlds that we've brought up a few times, versus the level of Yosher is more specific. It's more direct. It's more particular, and so it's more detail oriented, and it's related more to the immanent light, the level of Memala Kol Amin. So what we're saying here, basically, when we're talking about this Kav line that's found in Adam Kadmon, and that it seeps down into the feet of the Yosher of this Adam Kadmon, we're saying that this it's like the particularities, like, and then it goes all the way down till Malchus of Asiya, which is the lowest of all worlds, the lowest part of all worlds, which is the world we live in. So we're basically saying in plain English is that in the master plan of all of creation, namely in Adam Kadmon, with all of the particularities and all that stuff, those particularities of Adam Kadmon, they contain within them our world. Our world is part of that master plan in an extremely detailed way, to the point that the Cove itself manifests that. So our world has that Cove, like there's like this unbroken chain through which the Cove seeps down from that level of the primordial man, like of the primordial creation, down into our world. So this is now our third reason why we see that this power of the ex nihilo is found within all of the world. So again, to recap, I'm going to keep reviewing as we go. So number one is because the neshama of each world, which gives it its power to create ex nihilo, comes from the kelim, the vessels of Malchus of Atzilus. The second is because the radiance of the Cove is found within Malchus of Atzilus, and it gets like smuggled through the partition along with the kelim. And then the third one we said here is it's not just the radiance of the Cove, but the Cove itself, which is housed and like it's vested within Adam Kadmon. That Cove itself, like it's that Adam Kadmon, which vests the Cove itself. That Adam Kadmon contains within it all of the worlds, including our worlds, and all of their details. And so now going along with this, so we say, so now speaking about this Cove, so this Cove is found in its source in Adam Kadmon. That's where it's vested in its real way. But then the radiance of this Cove, it radiates out from there and becomes vested in the light of the neshama of the 10 spheres of all of the lower worlds, which is Elokus, which is godliness. So it's like, again, going back to the souls of all these worlds, the souls contained within them, not only do they come from the kelim of Malchus of Atzilus, and not only do they have within them the radiance of the Cove from the level of Atzilus that gets pushed into them, but they're actually getting this radiance from Adam Kadmon itself, which is even the highest place, the place of this where the Cove is resides, kind of where it's vested. Okay, now, so we're talking about basically we've been talking about the Cove in different ways. We've been talking about the essential aspect of the Cove, and then we've been talking about the radiance of the Cove, the ha'ara of the Cove in Hebrew. Now we're going to talk about something which is called the ha'ara of the ha'ara, the radiance of the radiance. So that would be sort of like if you're in a room and there is light shining through a doorway, which in that other room is a window that is bringing in light from the outside. So it's like you're like once removed from that light. So you're not in the room that's directly receiving the light, even through the partition. You're in a different room. So you're getting the light from that other room. So it's a radiance of a radiance of a light. So the radiance of the Cove here now gets vested in the nefesh and ruach of the 10 spheres of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. So the nefesh and ruach are the two lower aspects of the soul. So the soul, remember, it has different parts to it. So the three kind of internal aspects of the soul are the neshama is the highest, then you have the ruach, and then you have the nefesh. So the two lower levels are the ruach and the nefesh. And so in the ruach, and then, so while the radiance of the Cove, the ha'ara of the Cove, gets vested within the neshama level of the 10 spheres of the worlds, the radiance of the Cove gets vested within the ruach and nefesh, or here he says nefesh and ruach of the Cove. And also within all of their vessels. So vessels are found within all the worlds. All the worlds have souls, and they have a soul aspect and a vessel aspect to them. So the radiance of the Cove is found both within the nefesh and ruach of each of the lower worlds, as well as in their vessels. Okay, now we've spoken about already the Cove, we've spoken about the ha'ara of the Cove, the radiance of the Cove, then we spoke about the radiance of the Cove, the ha'ara of the Cove, and not to really make your brain go crazy, but we have the ha'ara of the ha'ara of the Cove. So this is like a radiance of a radiance of a radiance of the Cove. So that would be like being in a room which has a window in it that is not to the outside, but it's to another room. And that other room has a window in it that is also not to the outside, but it's to another room that has a window in it to the outside. And so now you're in that inner room. And so you're receiving a radiance of a radiance of a radiance. So you're receiving the radiance of that initial room that has the sunlight or the amusement park like or whatever it is coming through, but it goes through a second room first before it gets to you. So there's 3 rooms in total. There's 3 radiances. There's the radiance of the radiance and the radiance. So this radiance of the radiance is found within all of the creatures, all of the formations, and all of the things that are made in all of the worlds. So basically everything that is made up in all of the different worlds. So we have the different levels here. So we have the radiance that comes down, the radiance of the Cove, and that is found within the soul level of the world, the neshama of the world. That's the highest part of the soul. Then we have the radiance of the world, and that's found within the 2 lower levels of the soul of the world. That's the nefesh and ruach of the world, as well as in the vessels of the world. And then we have the radiance of the radiance, and that's found in everything else, and all the beings that are found in each one of the worlds according to their nature, according to what they are. The world of Bria has what are called nivraim, like creations. Then the world of Yetzirah has notzarim, formations, and the world of Asiyah has nesaim, those things that are made. And so the basic idea is that there is this chain. It's like it's sort of a diminishment of the light in the sense that it's not a direct light, but it is coming from the same direct source. That's the bottom line of what we're learning about today. And the Alter Rebbe concludes here with a quote from Nehemiah, chapter 9, verse 6, where it says, "Hayamim b'chol asher behem v'ata mechayed kulam." The seas and all that they contain were made by you, and you give life to them all. So it's like the basic idea basically is just to show us, even if you weren't able to follow along, I know it's a lot, this terminology and the map and all that stuff, it's to know that it all comes from the same source. Even if it's the difference is in terms of the revelation, the difference is in terms of what is seen, what is shown, but the source is the same. And then the Alter Rebbe concludes at the very end here, and he says, and all of this is in the aspect of the extension of the vital force to vivify these things. So meaning to say that this radiance of the radiance, which we just described, is the power, the life force that animates all of these different beings within it. So that's it for today. So that's the conclusion of this section. Again, I know it's like really dense. I know it's a lot, but hopefully, again, it's maybe, if nothing else, piquing your interest to really learn more Chassidus in detail. Also, just the exercise of trying to learn these things, of wrapping your mind around these things, like occupying your thoughts and trying to understand this. I know for me, it's a pretty intense mental exercise to try to figure out, first of all, what is the Tanya trying to say on a simple level, and then trying to figure out how to teach it to you guys, how to explain it to you guys in a way that is comprehensible to me. Like I can't explain something, I would not feel comfortable just kind of like giving over this material unless I really felt like I had a firm grasp on it, at least to some extent. And I don't want to be so bold as to say that I really understand these ideas for real, but they have to at least like somewhat, I have to kind of like have a logical map in my head around them and wrap my head around them. And I find that just doing the exercise, just putting in the work of trying to understand these concepts, that itself is the work. That itself brings you closer to God, because you're using your mind, which is the whole idea of Chabad. Chabad Chassidus is the Chassidus of the mind. It's the Chassidus where we really immerse our minds and meditate upon these ideas. And the more we do that, it really like rewires our minds. It's like that neuroplasticity for the mind, that we're really expanding our brains to contain godly thoughts. And hopefully that will seep into the rest of our being. So that being said, I will conclude here, and we'll continue along these lines tomorrow, where we still have quite a bit to go in this epistle. So stay tuned, and I'll speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.